Magandang gabi, magandang umaga, magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Depende sa oras ng inyong panonood. Ako si Attorney Robert John Dunesa, ang inyong profesor sa Diplomatic History of the Philippines sa AB History Program ng Mabalacat City College. At welcome sa una nating pagkikita. Welcome sa ating course sa SEM na ito. At ito ang ating unang araw. Mag-introduce muna tayo ng mga basic concepts sa ating diplomatic history of the Philippines. Ang mga concepts na ito ay magagamit natin sa ating mga future discussions sa course na ito. Bago ang lahat, syempre, alamin muna natin ang salitang diplomacy. Kasi ito ang magiging topic ng course na ito sa buong SEM, ang Diplomatic History of the Philippines. Diplomacy, as defined by National Geographic, is the art and science of maintaining peaceful relationships between nations, groups, or individuals. Often, diplomacy refers to representatives of different groups discussing such issues as conflict, trade, the environment, technology, or security. So, it is as defined, ang diplomacy ay isang art ng pakikipag-usap para mapanatili ang isang mapayapang relasyon sa pagitan ng dalawang bansa, ng dalawang pangkat, o kahit sa pagitan ng dalawang tao. Sabi nga nila, maganda ang kanyang paraan ng pag-solve ng issues kasi madiplomasya siya. So, it is an art. And ito din dahil sa haba na ng panahon ng pakikipagrelasyon natin sa ibang bansa, nakabisado na din natin to. At meron na tayong mga panuntunan, meron na mga pag-aaral, it has become a science too. Marami tayong pagkakataon sa kasaysayan ng Pilipinas na nagamit natin ang diplomasya. Pinaka-recent ay yung pagpasok ng China sa ating territory sa West Philippine Sea. May mga isla tayo at may bahagi ng ating dagat na bahagi ng Pilipinas, no? Base sa ating mapa, base sa ating territorial boundaries, at base na rin sa United Nations Convention on Laws of the Sea, bahagi ng ating exclusive economic zone. Ito ay pinasok ng China. So kapag papasukin tayo ng ibang bansa, we need to use diplomacy. No? Kasi it will maintain peaceful relations between nations. Huwag naman gera agad. Gera agad, grabe naman. Diplomacy muna. So that is diplomacy. So often, as it is said here, may mga representatives of different groups, no? They discuss the issue, especially in conflict. We also discuss issues, no? In terms of trade. Pwede din pag-uusapan mga climate change, no? Between two nations, between many nations. Pwede din yung technology, no? Pwedeng pag-usapan yon. And then we can also discuss issues of security. So maraming subject ang diplomacy. So keywords, peaceful relationships, nations, it talks about maintaining peace between two nations, no, in general. Diplomats, the people who practice diplomacy, are called diplomats. Diplomats try to help their country, encourage cooperation between nations, and maintain peace. A group of diplomats representing one country that lives in another country is called a diplomatic mission. A permanent diplomatic mission is called an embassy. And an ambassador is the lead diplomat at an embassy. So, ang Philippines, meron tayong diplomatic mission sa Amerika, and that is being permanent. Meron tayong embassy sa Amerika, which we will delve on later. No? Ayan, so marami tayong mga qualified, intelligent Filipinos who can speak foreign language and languages, and then we send them, no, to diplomatic missions to represent our country to other countries. So normally, mayroong board exam para maging diplomat. It's a very difficult exam. And that's because we choose the best and the brightest Filipinos to send them abroad to represent our country. No? Madami sila, we call them the diplomatic mission. And they live there. No? And then, kung permanent na ang ating diplomatic mission, meron na tayong embassy. And then, yung pinaka-head doon ay ang ambassador. No? Diplomacy kanina, it's the art and science of maintaining peace, peaceful relationship between nations. And those people who practice diplomacy are called diplomats. Consulates are called large diplomatic mission. We may have consulate, no? Besides an embassy. Pinaka-main natin ang embassy, and then sa ibang lugar, like the China, masyadong malaki for one embassy. United States of America, masyadong malaki for one embassy. We have representations, we call them the consulates. No? So, an example is the Embassy of the Philippines is in the capital, Washington, D.C. But we also have consulates in different parts of the U.S. territory, like Agana in Guam, we have a consulate there. Chicago in Illinois, we have a consulate there. Honolulu in Hawaii, we have a consulate there. Houston, Texas, New York, and San Francisco, California. Take note, doon maraming Pilipino. Sa Guam, sa Chicago, sa Honolulu, sa Houston, sa New York, and sa San Francisco. No? Itong mga consulates na to, under sa kanilang jurisdiction ang mga malalapit sa kanila na mga states. Recognition is important, no? Kasi it makes you a sovereign country. Kung i-declare mo yung sarili mo na country pero hindi ka naman recognized, then you're not a country yet. In politics, the concept of state requires the following elements: citizens, territory, government, recognition. So this is the recognition. So when a country declares independence, it needs to be recognized as independent by other countries. No? Countries may recognize new nations by receiving ambassadors and diplomatic missions. No? Example, Taiwan is not yet recognized by many countries around the world as a separate country from China. No? The Philippines, we really do not recognize Taiwan. We have one China policy. So we only recognize the China with the capital in Beijing, but not Taiwan. So we do not have diplomatic missions to Taiwan. And although we have so many Filipinos in Taiwan working there, and we also have bilateral relationships with Taiwan, meron tayong Philippine-Taiwan trading relationships, but really Taiwan is still working on recognition. Although some smaller countries recognized it, major countries do not yet. No? When we have diplomatic relations with another country, it means that we recognize that they are independent, and vice versa. They also recognize us as independent. So we are co-equal as states. Let us now proceed to the concept of foreign service. So the people working in the embassy are actually what we call employees of foreign service. Officers and employees of foreign service, according to the Foreign Service Act, shall, under the direction of the Secretary, represent abroad the interests of the Philippines and shall perform the duties and comply with the obligations resulting from the nature of their appointments or assignments or those imposed on them by law or by any order or regulation issued pursuant to law or by any international agreement to which the Republic of the Philippines is a part. The Foreign Service refers to two Filipinos who work in the embassy. They are under the direction of the DFA Secretary or the Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs. Whenever they are there as officers and employees of Foreign Service, they represent the Philippines. Matatandaan mo yung ating diplomat na nakita sa CCTV na manhandling her servant. That is actually an offense, kasi you're supposed to be representing the Philippines and the interests of the Philippines. Supposed to be a model, kasi we don't do that. We don't do that to our fellow men, supposedly. The officers and employees of foreign service shall, under such regulations as the President may prescribe, performs duties and functions in behalf of any government agency or any other establishment of the government requiring their service, including those in the legislative and judicial branches. But the absence of such regulation shall not preclude officers and employees of the service from acting for and on behalf of any such government agency or establishment whenever it shall, through the department, request their services. They are actually under the regulations that the President may prescribe. So, under the office of the President, simply because they represent the Philippines abroad. They perform their duties and functions in behalf of any government agency, whether executive, legislative, or judicial. And then the chief of mission, it refers to a principal officer appointed by the President of the Philippines with the consent of the Commission on Appointments to be in charge of an embassy or legation or other diplomatic mission of the Philippines, or any other person assigned to minister, residence, charge d'affaires, commissioner, or diplomatic agent. An embassy, the highest person there, will be called the chief of mission, responsible for all the foreign service employees under his command. Needless to say, they have to live a decent, law-abiding life. No? They are actually a picture of the Philippines. They represent the Philippines in the country where they are assigned. We send the best and the brightest of the Filipinos there. Diplomacy work. So how does this work? How do we maintain relationship with other countries? No? So diplomacy is accomplished by negotiation or bargaining. We need to place the issues that are the concerns of both or many countries. We place it on the negotiating table. We talk, we bargain, and we come up with solutions that are best for both parties. For diplomacy to work, wala dapat na aagrabyadong bansa. Kasi ang diplomat niya gumagawa ng paraan so that ang kanilang interest ay mai-advance. No? So each group usually ask for more than they expect to get. Normally, we should be selfish. Each diplomat, no, sitting on the negotiating table ay selfish, no, sa kanilang interests. Kailangan nangunguna ang kanilang mga interests, no, ng mga bansa nila. So they usually ask for more than they expect to get. Because of the selfishness, we need to come up with a compromise. Kailangan nating mag-sacrifice. Kailangan din nilang mag-sacrifice para doon tayo sa gitna. No? Para makaka-come up tayo with a viable, workable, and acceptable compromise. An outside diplomat may help in the negotiations. For example, Marty Atisari, a Finnish diplomat working for the UN, helped Namibia gain independence from South Africa in 1990. So diplomatic sanctions may be used in case of violation of agreements. If the solutions are not arrived at, countries may also threaten to use economic sanctions or penalties. An example for this is in 2006, many countries across the globe agreed not to trade with North Korea in an effort to stop the country from illegally testing nuclear weapons. So that there will be nuclear weapons in the world, so that countries will not undertake developing nuclear weapons. Countries around the globe agreed not to trade with North Korea. So that is how diplomacy works. Ang hirap kung wala kang bansang kasundo, no? You will be isolated and your economy will not get a boost from foreign trade. Another is, in 1990, Iraq invaded the neighboring country Kuwait. When Iraq refused to leave Kuwait, the United Nations approved a military response. A coalition or group of nations working together fought the Iraqi army, forcing them out of Kuwait. If things in the negotiating table, no, hindi nagkasundo, then the countries, no, may use force, no, tulad ng nangyari sa United Nations, no, approved a military response, no, to force the Iraqi army out of Kuwait. So kanina, trade threats, no, embargoes, no, and then ngayon parang military response, no, which are perfectly valid, no? An action that is perfectly valid because diplomacy failed. So successful negotiation results in a diplomatic agreement. The most formal kind of agreement is a treaty. Yan. There's another concept called treaty, a written contract between countries. The Treaty of Versailles, for instance, formally ended the World War II. Here is a picture of the Treaty of Versailles. They negotiated, no, for the formal ending of World War I. So let's take a look at the Philippine foreign policy. How do we actually maintain relationship with other countries? So Republic Act number 7157, the Philippines Foreign Service Act of 1991, gives mandate to the Department of Foreign Affairs to implement the three pillars of Philippine foreign policy as follows. No? So these are our thrust. In case of doubt, no, in our relationship with other countries, we always act or decide in favor of, number one, preservation and enhancement of national security of the country, promotion and the attainment of economic security. And then third, protection of rights and promotion of the welfare and interests of the Filipinos overseas. The Philippine foreign policy, the three pillars. Yung mga negotiators natin, mga diplomats natin abroad, takes these three into consideration. So you can also find some provisions of Philippine foreign policy in the 1987 Philippine Constitution. So the most important provisions of the 1987 Philippine Constitution which pertain to the framing of Philippine foreign policy are as follows. Article 2, Section 2, the Philippines renounces war as an instrument of national policy, adopts the generally accepted principles of international law as part of the law of the land, and adheres to policy of peace, equality, and justice. With Article 2, Section 2, the Philippines do not go to war right away. But hindi naman pinagbabawal dito ang defensive war. Yung pag inatake ka, nalalaban tayo. No? Ito lang hindi yung aggressive war na parang we do the attack. No? So that is the reason why we are as tolerant as we can be with some Chinese vessels encroaching the West Philippine Sea. We are as tolerating as we can be. But we are filing, and we should be, filing diplomatic protest. Baka isipin nila, okay lang sa Philippines. But all in all, we do not really adhere to war. We renounce it, in fact. And as a national policy, we believe na we can settle things out under the international law. And we adopt that international law as a part of the law of the land. And we also adhere to the policy of peace and equality as well as justice. Article 2, Section 7 also state that the state shall pursue an independent foreign policy. In its relations with other states, the paramount consideration shall be national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination. These mentioned national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination are non-negotiable values. There is no other rule so settled than the Philippines being a state, independent state. So, yung territorial integrity natin is of paramount importance, and then our national interest, no, at all times should be placed to the front. No? Bayan muna, bago sarili. And then our right to self-determination. So these are the guiding principles. No? The 1987 Constitution itself laid down the guiding principles when we conduct foreign relations. We are governed by our very own foreign policy. So for your assignment, we've got a 20 points assignment here. You read, you watch from YouTube, from Google, and from other reliable source. Please use your discretion. And then after reading, what is your opinion about West Philippine Sea being claimed by China? No? So if you could look at the map, the red broken line were the claims covered by China. No? They are technically claiming some 90% of the West Philippine Sea. So what is your opinion about this? If you are a diplomat, how will you argue for the Philippines? What is your opinion? Ang number two, different from your opinion, what should be our stand on this matter based on dun sa constitution natin that was quoted a while back? What should be the stand of the Philippines in this matter for 10 points? So you just write your ideas in a one whole sheet of paper or one short page, a document, Microsoft Word document, no? And submit it to our Edmodo. Then if you write it on your yellow sheet, take a photo of it and upload it to our Edmodo. So that's for a 20-point assignment from your end. And we're done for today. So I want you to do your assignment. But before you doing your assignment, find a reliable source so that you can form a meaningful ideas on the China claiming the West Philippine Sea and what should be the Philippines stand to it. No? So I hope to see you again in our next video. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.